Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, we are talking about writing for youth. We are talking about the writing process, and I'm delighted to be having a conversation with author Neesha Meminger. Neesha, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
Absolutely. Nice to have you. That chair looks incredibly comfortable behind you. So probably much more comfortable than the wooden chair that I'm sitting in, but nevertheless. Folks out there might know you for work, or they can find work in books like What Girls Know, Shine. Let me make sure I've got this.
Shine Coconut Moon. Yeah.
Shine, Coconut Moon, and Jazz in Love.
hmm
I
Yeah.
could not
And
read my own notes there. Sorry about
no, that's okay.
that.
Yeah. And I did a fantasy novel also, Into the Wise Dark.
I love fantasy. Love it.
hmm
What drew you to storytelling?
Oh, so, probably like most folks who grew up as avid readers, I found it as a way to escape. It was a
Mhm.
way of expanding my world. Um, it was a way of discovering new worlds. Um, yeah, and so I read a lot, right? This was before the days of social media.
Mhm.
So we weren't scrolling. We were finding other ways to connect with our imaginations and with other experiences, right? So
Mhm.
living in new worlds, living and connecting with different kinds of people, new environments. That was the way we did it. We did it through TV shows. We did it through books. We did it
Yeah.
through
Mhm.
movies, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
So I was really drawn to stories for that reason. It was a way for me to get out of my sort of limited parameters at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. What is a book or a story that had an impact on you and maybe even changed your life in some way?
Oh, so many. Um, I think I'm gonna say probably when I was in the more kind of formative years. So when I was younger, one of the first books that really had a tremendous impact on me was Tuck Everlasting. And
Mhm.
and I think it just blew me away, this idea of of not having to live within the confines of sort of physical restrictions, So it was a book about living forever. And I think that was a huge pull for me. This idea that, this story could make me think of things that um, were not possible, or that
Mhm.
I was told were not possible in physical reality. So they sort of defied the laws of physics. And that was just so intriguing to me. Um, I think probably that's where my love for like fantasy also
Yeah.
began. Yeah.
I was
So I
gonna
think that for
say
sure.
that
Yeah.
book is such a great blend of there's a sense of realism and then there's just that nice little hint of fantasy. I've taught that book before and kids tend to really enjoy that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of magical realism, I have a real sort of soft spot for that particular genre.
Mhm.
And part of that is because I grew up, you know, my background, I was born in India. So I grew up with stories uh, that were along that genre. So, things that I heard from my parents that seemed mystical and mythical. It was so much a part of my childhood that
Mhm.
that book, I think, probably resonated pretty strongly for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, as a side note or as a sort of stem from that question, how do you hope your writing impacts people?
Oh, hmm. I think, one of the reasons I started writing, One was it was a way for me to express things that that maybe I wasn't allowed to talk about or that were forbidden in my home. Um, Things like my body, sexuality, anger,
Hmm.
strong emotions, even grief, like tremendous grief. Um, the truth, in a world where people are trying very hard to live according to the rules and um, weaving narratives about our family and family dynamics, the family secrets. As a child, I was always very, I blurted things out. I blurted the truth out without, I didn't have that filter, right? A lot of children
Hmm.
don't and so for me, that would get me in trouble a lot. So I learned that writing was like in journals and so on, that was somewhere where just, I could blurt to
Hmm.
my heart's content and not have to worry about sort of any kind of punishment or repercussions. So I think when I write, that's what I try to do. I try to put some of those truths that I know um, into the book. And so my characters are often struggling with their truth in a world where that truth is not always welcome or not always sort of allowed to exist in a sort of bold and unabashed way.
Hmm.
So I think as a young person, that's what I was looking for. I was looking for those stories that shared some of the truths that I knew to be true, but that were not really being expressed anywhere around me, and probably were discouraged from being expressed. So I think that because I was looking for those stories, those are the stories that I write. So I'm hoping that they land with readers in that same way. When I found some of those books, The House on Mango Street,
Hmm.
books like that that really kind of spoke to my experience, which I wasn't really seeing around me. um, those books really resonated deeply. And so I'm hoping for that kind of an impact or an effect on readers, readers who see themselves or their truths written and expressed in ways that they maybe wouldn't put together for themselves or that they haven't seen articulated around them.
Love it. Love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, you write particularly with a youth audience or young adult audience in mind. What's it like to write for that particular audience, but also keeping other audiences in mind as well?
Yeah, it's very interesting because the young adult category is a fairly recent category.
Hmm.
It used to be called juvenile, like when I was in eighth grade or when I was a middle grade reader or a young adult reader, it was called juvenile. And so I would go to that section in the library. I talked to the librarian, and they would often bring me to that area of the library.
Hmm.
It's now sort of moved to young adult, and it's really when I first started writing, I didn't know that I was writing young adult literature. I
Right,
was just
right.
writing, right? And the stories that held the most emotional charge or conflict were stories from that time period in my life. And so I told a lot of those stories because that's where I was trying to figure out who I was
Hmm.
as an adult. I was on the cusp of childhood and adulthood, and I was looking at the adults around me, trying to figure out what kind of person do I want to be in this world? What's my relationship to the systems that I'm living in and to the people that are around me? Um, so it was a time that was really fraught with tension and conflict and
Hmm.
a lot of self-reflection and confusion. And so the first book I wrote was this tome, this like 500-page doorstopper. And my agent said, "This is really great, but the character that I'm most drawn to is the teenager. Would you
Mm-hmm.
be willing to really sort of immerse in that character and tell me that character's story?" And so that's where Shine Coconut Moon was born. Um, that was the character from this larger epic story of migration of my peoples. Um, and so we focused in on the teenage character, and I was hooked because I really feel like though everyone can relate to those stories. When I started on Facebook was around the same time that Shine Coconut Moon came out also. Um, and I reconnected with a lot of high school folks. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized that, oh my gosh, you're the same person. Like I would mean, people, of course, their lives have changed and, everyone has had their journeys and they're in different places. But when we connected, I was like, I still see you and I still see a lot of those dynamics that play in your life. And so I think there's a lot of relatability, we can see in the larger um, sort of mainstream media landscape, young adult novels are what all of media is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
The Hunger Games was a young adult novel. Twilight is a young adult novel. Even if you look at things like The Lord of the Rings, those are books that I read in my childhood, like
Wow.
The Hobbit, right? These all feature young protagonists. And when I first was talking to my editor, I said, why is my novel characterized as young adult? And she said, honestly, the only thing that makes a young adult novel is the age of the protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what categorizes it. And so I think that even older readers, we've been that age. And because it was such a larger than life time, that period in our lives, we're still deeply connected to it.
Yeah,
And we can still
absolutely.
really connect with those emotions and that time of turbulence in our lives, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's a really major turning point. And that's what I find so interesting about it. It's like a huge gold mine of stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think back to moving from that juvenile category to just adult was essentially what I considered any book beyond that. Same library categories I'm thinking about when I was growing up, and there was that very quick move of like, I guess I'm reading these books now. So yeah, absolutely. And funny how sometimes people come after and put categories on things as well.
Yeah, and that the category part is really just a marketing thing,
Hmm.
right? Like it's not really anything beyond that. It's marketing, it's categorization. And really, people are drawn to what they're drawn to. They're drawn to good stories.
Yeah.
Um, and so the young adult genre really appeals to, there's no age range around that,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Read what you like. Read what you enjoy.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, final official question has two parts, and that is what's next for you? What currently has your creative focus, and where can people find out more about your work?
Okay, so well, I'll do the second part of that one first. People
Okay.
can find out more about my work at my website, which is simply nishameminger.com. Um, And what's next for me is I do have a manuscript out right now. Um, and there's not really much I can say about it.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
It's sort of historical fiction. I will say that it's sort of like Bridgerton meets Decolonize Your Mind. So
Oh, nice. Okay.
yeah. So it does look at it is set in the 1800s, so Victorian era, and it is fiction, um, fictionalized true story. So it's actually based on true events.
Mhm.
Um, And it looks at colonization. It looks at the history of colonial India and its relationship with Britain. So, yeah, I'm excited about it.
Um,
And yeah, that's where that one's at.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm glad to hear that's on the way and sounds really interesting. Looking forward to reading it when it is out in the world. And many thanks for the time and the conversation.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. This was really fun.
Absolutely.